What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MMA meeting. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I've been pretty busy with a bunch of stuff, and let's start with that last fight night card. Every single fight was a finish. Now, it wasn't the first time. I know a lot of people think it was the first card to ever do it. Way back when Rockhold beat Bisping back in 2014, also every single fight on that card was a finish. And in fact, it had 11 finishes, whereas Santos versus Hill had 10 finishes. So, in fact, it didn't break the record, but it was a great one regardless. And we gotta talk about Sam Alvey, man. He has officially been released. And for a lot of fans, it's a long time coming. I never hope for anybody to get cut or anything like that. I know a lot of people don't want to see him in the UFC. And I think it's more about the precedent, like the consistency of fighters that have been cut for like 2 losses in a row. Those guys get cut, but Sam Alvey doesn't, who's winless in his last 9 fights that stretch out for 4 years. I think it's the longest winless streak in UFC history, unless BJ Penn surpassed that. Nope, BJ Penn is winless for 8 fights. Sam Alvey has 9. It's kind of crazy, man. I hope the best for Sam Alvey, man. He's a nice guy and everything, but man, that's a lot of losses. And almost all of them have been pretty one-sided, man. I mean, Nickal just one-shot him, fell him, and finished him off. Like, it's kind of crazy. And Nickal is a good fighter and all, but it just shows that Sam Alvey probably doesn't have much left, at least at the top organization of the world. We learned who has the shortest reach on the roster, Corey McKenna, with 58.5-inch reach. That's crazy. I think she's like 5'3". That's a 4'10.5" reach. Crazy. Terrence McKinney looked amazing. I've been telling a lot of people, man, that guy's going to be something in the future. Great submissions, great knockout ability, very well-rounded, young, and continuously learning. The biggest thing about him is to learn to control himself in fights. That's it. If he controls himself, he could beat a lot of guys in the lightweight division. And I want to get honest about Mohammad Usman. So Mohammad Usman's all the craze right now. And I will have to say, being the underdog and coming out with that big knockout was great. I mean, it showed that he has crushing power, and parrying and slipping the outside of the jab to land his check left hook was something I didn't expect to be successful in the fight for him. Being honest, I don't know how far he gets, because he's not exceptionally skilled anywhere. Compared to his brother Kamaru Usman, at least he has a wrestling pedigree that most guys cannot fight against. With Mohammad Usman, like, where does he really excel compared to the other heavyweights? And he's not even the biggest guy there. Kamaru's one of the biggest welterweights. It's hard for anybody to contest his strength and his size. Blow for blow, he beats most of these guys. Whereas for Mohammad Usman, unless he drops down to 205, I see him getting outgunned by a lot of the heavyweights. I mean, look at Francis Ngannou, much more power than Usman. Derek Lewis, Tai Tuivasa. And these guys are all bigger than him as well. I mean, Mohammad Usman is 6'2" at 236 pounds. He's one of the smallest heavyweights on the entire roster. The best move for him probably would be going down to 205 or try to fight through his speed advantage at heavyweight, considering that those guys are not as technical as the light heavyweights. Actually, there's a big gap in skill between the 2 weight classes. And we gotta talk about the sad loss, man. Vicente Luque gets knocked out for the first time in his career. It put an alarm out there for all the granite chins out there, man. Max Holloway, Brendan Moreno, Nate Diaz, Jon Jones. I mean, even Tony Ferguson's knockout loss showed everybody, but that's a different kind of thing because it's Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler can knock anybody out in the world. You cannot rely on that chin, man. You take too many shots, and one day you're going to go out. Vicente Luque took a horrendous amount of damage in that fight. I mean, so did Geoff Neal. Geoff Neal took a bunch of shots, but Neal's power might be a little bit of a higher magnitude than Luque's. He might hit a little bit harder, man. But not just that, he was way more precise with his punches, especially from that left hand. The left straight, and then eventually those left uppercuts were getting through, and Luque just does not move his head at all. It's crazy. I mean, I see a lot of people saying that it's something we've never seen from Luque, like he's fighting differently ever since the Michael Chiesa fight or even Bilal Muhammad loss, but that's not too long ago. The Bilal fight was literally a couple months ago. The Michael Chiesa fight was like a full year ago. It's not that Vicente's fighting differently. He's actually not looking that different. It's that he's fighting guys now that can really pick off on his chin. Look when he fought Stephen Thompson. Wonderboy did the same thing, except he just doesn't have the same kind of power that Geoff Neal does. Just straight punches, man. He walks into them. He doesn't really have any defense to them. He tries to counter you. He tries to get some payback and stuff and overwhelm you with his own power. He's offensively technical, but defensively, he's one of the least technical we've ever seen. And it's been a consistent thing throughout his entire career. I mean, look at his fight with Brian Barberena. Same exact defense, man. And even look at his fight with Leon Edwards. Even Bilal Muhammad was catching him a couple times with similar punches. I think it's just that everybody likes Vicente Luque, and they want to attribute his loss to something that's external instead of internal. Something made him something made him worse. Something made him this punching bag. And we've never seen it before, when actually we've seen it before. In fact, many, many times. And this defenselessness has finally caught up to him. And it worries me about Charles Oliveira, because this same thing can happen to Oliveira. Another guy who doesn't move his head. Another guy that marches down the center line and gets caught continuously in every single one of his fights. The only difference with Oliveira is he tries to not take the punches full on like that, and he will fall back to his guard. Vicente Luque will try to eat every single punch, flush to the chin, and return punches. So Vicente is actually taking more damage than even Oliveira is because he's taking consecutive shots on the feet, whereas Oliveira falls to his back and now guys don't want to chase him to the ground and now he's able to recover. But as much as I like Oliveira, this is something I've been worried about that might happen to him as well. And the day that he loses, it's probably going to be a bad knockout loss, like a hard one to watch. But this was a good win for Geoff Neal, man. The best of his entire career. He's going from, number 11 to, number 6. And remember when I was talking about the welterweight matchups that nobody wanted to fight each other? And I started to talk about Geoff Neal versus Vicente Luque? Again, why did Luque take this fight? In hindsight now, he's not as good as Geoff Neal. He lost to the better fighter. So perhaps he didn't deserve to be the number 6 ranked fighter in the world, or Geoff Neal deserved to be a little bit higher than where he was, but he himself was losing many fights. There was no benefit for Vicente Luque to take a fight against Geoff Neal. It made absolutely no sense. And now look at it. Geoff Neal's going to rise into number 7, number 6, and Vicente might drop to number 9. It's a big drop for number 6. And I already talked about the main event, Thiago Santos versus Jamal Hill. If you guys haven't checked it out, make sure to watch my breakdown video of it. And I do want to address one more thing about that last pay-per-view card, UFC 277. And it's something that I've been questioning ever since. I mean, I've waited a little bit more than a week just to see where they all went. What happened to Julianna Pena's fan base? This is not to disrespect her or former fans or anybody. I mean, fans will like who they want to like. And Julianna Pena didn't ask for a big fan base or anything. She just fought and garnered this fan base that thought that she was the next big thing. But it's a genuine question because I've never seen a fan base get so large after a win and then vanish once they lost. And I'm talking about I don't even see a Pena fan anymore. I don't see any posts positive about her anymore. I don't see anything. And when you think about it, you feel bad for Pena. Everybody's behind the Rocky story and all that, and now everyone's just making memes about her. The funniest one is with the cartoon noises. Oh my, I replayed that 100 times, man. That never gets old. But it's like a phenomenon. Before this rematch, I mean, there was an influx of fans that were behind her. I could not hear the end of them. Talking about how much better she was than Nunes. She's going to dominate the division now. She's a new face of the weight class and all that stuff. I mean, I saw thousands of comments, and now I literally see none of it anymore. And it's not a knock on anybody. It's not a knock on the fans. It's not a knock on Pena. Fans will like who they want to like, and no one can knock them on that. Most of the times, fans side with the winners. I've been watching the sport for a very long time, and I've never seen a fan base disappear so quickly. I think people expected something out of Pena that wasn't necessarily true. People thought that she was going to be this next force that was long time coming, but at the end of the day, she turned out to be the Matt Serra of the female divisions. Never really had a spectacular win before the Nunes fight. Never really showed any kind of dominance. Never really showed that she can handle the top fighters in the world. But when she did, fans thought that it was some kind of shock that nobody saw. Pena's way better than we expected. But at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily that. GSP had an off night. GSP, I think, came injured into that first fight with Matt Serra. I have to go back and look at that, but I think I read that somewhere. But eventually got TKO'd, tapped to strikes. Amanda Nunes came in sick, came in injured, had a dominant first round against her, but gassed out because of the injuries and because of the sickness. That is pretty much confirmed at this point. Nunes did not gas out because anything Pena really did to her. It was more of her own tribulations going into the fight. GSP and Nunes both came back in the rematch and absolutely destroyed Serra and Pena. Most of the time, fights are not flukes. Most of the time, a fighter does not win because of a fluke. But there are examples of that happening, and here is one of them. And all respect to Pena, she is super tough, and I do want to talk about that actually. The whole tough commentary thing. If you mention that a fighter is tough once or twice, it's noteworthy, right? Yes, they are very tough. They're taking a bunch of damage. They're able to pull their way through, and maybe they can have a comeback in the fight, right? We just saw that with Chris Duncan's comeback win on the Contender Series. Looked like he was going to get knocked out and then came back and finished his opponent off out of nowhere. Comeback wins in the women's divisions is not easy, man, because they don't have that same kind of fight-changing power. Some fighters could do it like Nunes could, but in Pena's case, it was only the toughness of her taking damage. That was really all it was going to be about. So when you hear it once or twice, it's noteworthy. When you hear it 100 times, when you constantly hear the commentators say, Pena's tough, man, she's so tough, wow, she's so tough. The real translation to that is, Pena is getting demolished out here. So it's kind of a backhanded compliment. What I've been saying for years already is, fighters should not want to hear how tough they are. When they start hearing how tough they are, it means that the fight is not going well for them. They're getting hit too much, they're getting out-scrambled, they're getting in bad positions on the ground and stuff. I'm trying to win this fight, not be a punching bag. bag, because when I went back and watched the fight, I couldn't help but hear how many times Rogan and DC were praising Pena's toughness. I mean, yeah, she is tough, but she's getting destroyed out here. Man, she got dropped 5 times. She got out-scrambled for the most part. She got her back taken. She spent so much time off of her back and not really doing much, throwing up failed submission attempts over and over again, not even getting that close, getting elbowed and cut open and all this stuff. Yeah, she's super tough, but we gotta also talk about what Nunes is doing right here, because she's doing a lot of things right. And another thing we gotta talk about is Bo Nickal. For anybody that doesn't know Bo Nickal, he's a prodigy in wrestling, man. The guy is insanely skilled when it comes to wrestling. Throughout high school, collegiately, he won the gold medal in 2019 for wrestlers that are under 23 years old. An insane record in high school with an insane amount of pins. I think it's like 70 to 80% of his wins have been by pin. And he was ranked like 9th pound for pound wrestler in the entire nation. The guy's young right now too. He's 26 years old, just started MMA like last year, and he's looking amazing. For anybody that doesn't know much about Bo Nickal, I highly recommend checking this guy out, because this is a wrestler that the middleweight division is going to need. And if he keeps performing this way and steadies his progression, getting his striking better, his BJJ better, and all that, he can absolutely be a future champion, 100%, even calling it this early. Because the thing about the middleweight division is nobody's really a wrestler. Entering the UFC, Bo Nickal might be one of the best wrestlers we've ever seen in the entire organization's history. So all these kickboxers, all these strikers at middleweight, they might have a nightmare on their hands when this guy comes in. But Bo Nickal just fought his second professional MMA fight on the Contender Series and absolutely ran through that guy, got his second first round finish. The first time he fought, he knocked the guy out very quickly, less than a minute. I think it was like 30 seconds or something. Showed impressive striking for someone that hasn't been striking for that long. He definitely has a lot of power in his hands, but of course needs to polish things up. You're not going to see a world-class striker from a world-class wrestler who's only been striking for like a year. But when it came to his second professional fight against Zachary Borrego, ran through him, man. Double legged, took his back, choked him out, made it look very easy. He finished him in like a minute. I have such high expectations for this guy. And other than that, there's been just like some tidbits on the news, nothing too crazy to talk about, but some things that were very interesting. So the GOAT came out and finally spoke. And when Artem speaks, you listen. Artem Lobov has come out and talked about the whole Proper 12 business and actually said that it was his idea. I would expect no less. A successful business like that coming from a man like Artem Lobov, it just makes perfect sense. Honestly though, the guy does have a major in finance, so I can see him coming up with a big business plan like that, and he got it behind Conor McGregor. So Artem said that Conor even offered him $1 million up front just for this, and Artem turned it down. You need friends like Artem, man. Every guy needs a friend like Artem. I don't know if Conor still has him around. I mean, maybe all the crazy stuff that Conor has done, Artem hasn't really been around him. There was the whole thing that, he got slapped by Khabib and then Conor came to defend him and all that stuff. But that was a little bit different. All the other stuff like attacking MGK, jumping the cage in Bellator, slamming the guy's phone, hitting that guy in the bar and all that stuff. I wonder if Artem was ever around him whenever Conor was doing that stuff, because I would see Artem being the voice of reason. I mean, he seems like a very intelligent guy. And for him to turn down $1 million from Conor just shows how much he cherishes that friendship. He would not take money from Conor. I know people like that as well, and they're the best to have around, man. But it is pretty crazy that when the company sold, I don't know exactly how it went down, but the shares sold for $600 million. And for sure, Conor had a large chunk of that. I ever wonder if Artem starts kicking, thinking, man, I should have had some stake in this company. I'm pretty sure he thought it was going to be successful, and he wanted it for Conor. I mean, Artem has said it before that he's always going to be successful in something. And speaking of him, Conor McGregor's out here hinting at what a lot of people thought was retirement and then came back after him and said he would never leave. It seems like he's going to be part of a Roadhouse movie. I don't know what role he's going to have, and that's great for him and all, but I wonder once he does that if he's going to stick around in acting or he's going to come back into fighting. I really have no idea, but this kind of move, if he stays over there in acting, it's something that, a lot of people already anticipated from him. I actually never watched Roadhouse. I never watched it with, I think with Patrick Swayze was the main actor. Apparently it's a classic, but I don't know if it's actually good. There's a lot of classics that, aren't watchable today. I'm contemplating, should I watch it? You guys told me about, was it Terminator 2? That was a good movie to watch, and I listened to you guys. I don't know. Not much of a movie guy. I haven't really watched too many movies. I blow a lot of people away when I say I never even watched any of the Godfather movies. I never watched a Star Wars movie. I never watched, Rambo. I never watched any of these. So they're all very new to me. And did you guys check out Jon Jones' new post of him hitting pads? He looks so much better in this one. The other videos he posted out there did not make him look that good. He looked very slow and forced in a lot of movements. I mean, the guy is carrying on a lot more weight than usual, and it's evident, especially upper body weight. This time hitting the pads, his technique actually looked really good. He looked faster, a little bit more powerful, but still a tad forced. Not the most snap with his punches, so I don't know if he's going to be that powerful in heavyweight. He might get outpunched by Stipe, who hits very hard and definitely has snappy punches. Forced punches don't necessarily generate that much power, especially to knock someone out, but Jones has always been more of a kicker than he has been a puncher. I really wonder if he's going to be able to keep up for 5 rounds against Stipe, who has shown historically over and over again to be able to fight very well for 5 rounds against, DC and Francis Ngannou and a bunch of other fighters as well. I mean, that crazy JDS fight back in the day, that alone showed to me that Stipe is going to be very hard to outpace at heavyweight. And the fact that Jones hasn't fought in such a long time, I can absolutely see Stipe winning this fight, 100%. The only thing going against Stipe is the fact that he has been knocked out before, he has taken a lot of damage, and he is a bit older than Jones. That's going to be a fantastic fight. I cannot wait to see that one. And leave it to Tony Ferguson. Apparently, he has chosen his new gym. It's not confirmed if it's a permanent move, but judging from the post from Jackson Wink, he's training over there. So he's going to the place that everybody else seemingly is leaving. That's a Tony move if I've ever seen one. Leave it up to Tony Ferguson, man, because out of all the great options that he had, Mark Henry Cejudo, I know he would probably never do it, but for his career, it would be excellent for him. Move to AKA. There's a great amount of gyms right now that have polished striking while also implementing strong wrestling. He could even go to Trevor Whitman, to be honest. Is he actually going to be training at Jackson Wink for his big redemption, for, returning to his prime form and all that? Those coaches do not seem to mesh well with the way Tony fights. They're very methodical, they're very straightforward in their approach, whereas Tony is wild out there. And at his age, there's nothing that's really going to help him, in my opinion. I mean, I hope something helps him. I hope he's able to return to his prime form. But nearing 40 years old, it's going to be nearly impossible for a coach to be able to tame and mold you. If anybody can make it work, it would be someone like Tony Ferguson. But I did not expect Jackson Wink. Out of all gyms right now, this is the one. I mean, longtime fighters from Jackson Wink like Donald Cerrone, Diego Sanchez, they have all left. Jon Jones is not even there anymore. Now, he didn't leave on his own accord, but the killers that were there like a few years ago, seemingly most of them are gone now. So who's even Tony going to spar with over there? This very well may be the end of Tony Ferguson, man. Perhaps maybe Greg Jackson or Mike Winklejohn can get Tony Ferguson to start wrestling and be a lot more methodical, but that coaching style they have doesn't seem to go well with Tony's fighting style, or the way he just thinks about the sport. And I'm not even kidding, AKA would be one of the best moves for Tony's career, for the fact that they got everything that he needs to progress, or at least in theory progress. I mean, there's probably no other gym that will help him better than AKA, but he probably has too much pride to go there. He has something against Khabib, for whatever reason that is. I mean, because Khabib pulled out. I mean, but Tony pulled out before. So and at this point, Khabib is retired. So why doesn't Tony just set that aside? Leave it in competition. Leave it in sport. Khabib does not fight anymore. He'd be glad to help out Tony. And you have guys like DC over there, an excellent wrestling coach. And Tony has a lot of people to spar with. Another great thing also is it's in the same state that he lives in, right? Doesn't he live in Cali? Eddie Bravo's headquarters is there too. So it's honestly the perfect gym for him. It fits his style, pace that he wants to go at. Those guys go hard over there. And they're experts in the same stuff that Tony needs to excel in right now. But his pride is just not going to allow him. And that's such a shame. And with that out of the way, let's get right to the questions. We're going to start with the members first. We're going to start with Yusuf Cisse. Hey Weasel, in your opinion, what is the greatest win for each current champion in the UFC? Greatest win for Francis Ngannou was, of course, the Stipe rematch. For Yuri Prochazka is a Glover win. For Adesanya, I'll have to say, is the first Whittaker win. Something that goes kind of against it is the fact that Whittaker didn't fight the way he should have. And in the second fight, I mean, you could kind of say that could be Adesanya's greatest win for the fact that he did win the fight against the best version of Whittaker, but at the same time, he should have lost on the scorecards. You can argue one of the two Whittaker wins. For Usman, I definitely have to say it's the first Colby win. I mean, back and forth and stuff, and got the finish, which is different than the second one. In the second, you can argue that the fight was a draw, whereas for the first, there was no argument. The fight got finished. For Charles Oliveira, definitely the best win of his career was the Dustin win. Dustin Poirier is the best fighter he ever faced, dealt with a lot of trouble on the feet, but ultimately submitted him before he even got into the fourth round. So he did the best fighter he's ever fought the same way he does everybody else. That was very impressive. And it's a fight that a lot of people thought he would lose. Alexander Volkanovski has to be the last Max Holloway win. That is one of the greatest performances I've ever seen before. Not just for him, for any champion ever. To make Max Holloway look like a C-level fighter in front of you is wild. because Max is one of the most skilled fighters we've ever seen. And Volkanovski looked like that guy didn't even belong in there with him. Aljamain Sterling's best win might have to be the last Patreon one, even though it was kind of close. To throw a wrench into that, the Corey Sandhagen win might actually be his best. Patreon and Corey went at it for 5 rounds. Corey looked really good in the fight, but Sterling submitted Corey so fast. It made everybody believe that Sterling might be the best fighter in the whole weight class before he was a champion. So I would have to say actually the Corey Sandhagen win is Aljamain Sterling's greatest, considering how easily he did it. Deiveson Figueiredo's greatest win I would have to say is probably the first Benavidez one or the last Brendan Moreno win. Benavidez is a legend and all that, and he got a title shot and stuff. He was doing very well in his career. It absolutely got blasted by Deiveson. The reason why I don't bring up the second fight is because that wasn't Benavidez at his best. He should not have taken that fight. He took that fight months after getting demolished, definitely concussed by Deiveson. The second fight was an absolute beatdown from start to finish. For Amanda Nunes, now, she rules 2 divisions, but okay, featherweight, of course, a Chris Cyborg win. I would have to say the Cyborg win is definitely Nunes' best win of her entire career, regardless of weight class. It's a fight that she was the underdog going into. Cyborg is the scariest fighter in the world. Definitely look to have advantages when it comes to the matchup between the two. And Nunes still pulled it off in the first round. If we're going to talk about just bantamweight, the highest profile win is definitely the fight against Ronda. But if you're talking about the greatest win in terms of like performances and fighting the best competition, it's the first Valentina win. You can't bring up the second one because Valentina should have won. It was too close to call. The first one definitely went to Nunes, and she fought the best fighter in the world. But a lot of people didn't know at the time. I was calling it way back then. When I saw that first fight between them two, I said these are the 2 best fighters in the world. Better than Ronda, better than Tate, better than Holly. These 2 are the best. The greatest Valentina Shevchenko win at flyweight definitely has to go to Jessica Andrade. Probably the best fighter she fought outside of Santos. It made it look so easy. For Carla Esparza, either the first Rose win or the Yan Xiaonan win. And then we go to Emil. Hey Weasel, how do you see Islam versus Chandler fight going? In my opinion, after Oliveira, he has the best chance of beating Islam. He has very good pressure, good defense on the ground, crazy power, plus I believe he has underrated takedown defense. And all those things I believe is a nightmare matchup for Islam. Thank you for the content and keep up the great work, brother. Thank you so much for the question, man. I could definitely see what you're saying. It kind of comes down to, Chandler has good takedown defense. He's an amazing wrestler. If there is going to be anybody hard for Islam to take to the ground consistently and hold him down, it would be someone as big and strong and as technical at wrestling like Chandler. And at any given moment, he can knock Islam out, who necessarily doesn't have the biggest power himself, and maybe not be able to fight off Chandler's aggression. If his means of stopping Chandler from running him down is by shooting takedowns, he might hit a brick wall. He probably doesn't want to go head on with Chandler in any facet, whether it be takedowns or striking. And even if he gets Chandler to the ground, Chandler's going to explode. But the fight gets easy in the 4th and 5th rounds for Islam. That grueling fighting style that Islam has is going to gas Chandler out eventually. As long as Chandler does not catch Islam on the feet, that is. So, thinking about it right now, I would have to say that Chandler on paper might be the hardest matchup for Islam. But in practice, I can just see Islam eventually winning and defending a lot of the strikes that Chandler throws forward. Other guys you have to put up on the list there is, Arman Tsarukyan. You have to throw up Damir Ismagulov. You got to throw up Mateusz Gamrot. These, I believe, are the harder matchups compared to, Gaethje and Dustin and RDA, Tony Ferguson, Beneil Dariush. These guys all get destroyed. Like, Islam makes all these fights look really easy. But the younger guys coming up is where Islam's going to have a harder time. Then we go to Jax 206. Who is the best counter striker and pressure striker in each weight class in your opinion? Best counter striker at heavyweight, I would have to say, is Ciryl Gane. And the best pressure striker is also Ciryl Gane. Yes, he's definitely a better pressure striker than Francis. At light heavyweight, the best counter striker is by a mile ahead Magomed Ankalaev. The best pressure striker, I would probably have to say, is Yuri Prochazka, or at least he's the most effective pressure striker, not the most skilled, but the one that gets results. Jamal Hill is also up there. At middleweight, the best counter striker is easily Israel Adesanya. The best pressure striker, I have to say, is Alex Pereira. At welterweight, I would have to say the best counter striker is Wonderboy Thompson. And the best pressure striker is also Stephen Thompson, but he's never really pressuring that much in fights as he's easily backed up. If he ever is pressuring, nobody can pressure strike like Wonderboy. The best example of this is when he fought Johnny Hendricks. At lightweight, the best counter striker, it's tough. It goes either between Dustin or Conor. But the best pressure striker has to go to Rafael Fiziev. Dustin Poirier is in the mix there as well. Now, featherweight. Best counter striker, I would say definitely is Alexander Volkanovski. Best pressure striker, it's either Max or Volkanovski. The thing about Volk's pressure striking is the fact that it doesn't happen that often. But then again, when it does happen, he looks really good. But I just don't know if he looks better than Max. That's the only thing. Max's pressure striking is one of the best I've ever seen. Now, bantamweight. Best counter striker is easily Petr Yan, and best pressure striker is also Petr Yan. But there's a lot of good strikers there, man. Corey's amazing. Jose Aldo's amazing. TJ Dillashaw's really good. Marlon Vera, Song Yadong. Sean O'Malley's pretty good. Jack Shore. Now for the flyweight division, best counter striker might be Matthias Nickal. Best pressure striker is definitely Davis Figueiredo. Now women's bantamweight, best counter striker, I don't even know if she fights anymore. If she still fights, it's Germaine Durandamy. If not, it's Amanda Nunes. Best pressure striker is, again, if Germaine fights still, it's her. If not, then it's also Amanda Nunes. For flyweight, both are Shevchenko. Doesn't even matter. And then for strawweight, both might be Rose, but Zhang Weili is right there. So you can argue either Rose or Weili. Marina's really good too, though. And then with the King Louis. Hey Weasel, I recently saw a tweet stating that Colby Covington would be unranked at bantamweight and Usman would be ranked number 12 at best at bantamweight. Do you agree or disagree? Keep pumping out the great content. Yeah, man, people say this stuff all the time. They always say, Israel's really good, but if he was a featherweight, he'd get dusted by everybody. Usman's good for a welterweight, but if he was at bantamweight, he'd barely even crack the top 10. People say this all the time, but it's not fair to do that. On average, the heavier you go in weight classes, the less skilled they're going to be. It's because they can rely on their physical qualities, like they can rely on their power and stuff to get through. That's why heavyweights are sometimes a joke to a lot of fans because most of them are so unskilled and the puncher's chance of winning there is enormous. I mean, look at Derek Lewis's entire career. He'd be losing fights, getting out-techniqued all over the place and then lands one time and it's over. And in fights, you're going to hit and get hit. It happens to everybody. But then you have anomalies like Ciryl Gane, who is one of the best strikers pound for pound in the entire sport, even though he is a heavyweight. But you don't normally see that kind of thing. You don't normally see Jon Jones and Ciryl Ganes in the heavier weight classes. You only see like one of these guys. Whereas those guys are all over in the lighter weight classes. You see a bunch of Ciryl Ganes. You see a bunch of Jon Jones. You see a bunch of Israel Adesanyas with good grappling to his skill set. You see a lot of these guys all over the place. It's because there's a need to be more technical and they cannot rely even in training. It all comes back to how they train. This is what normally happens. Fighters start sparring really early and they start to figure out how they can perform in sparring. Heavier guys start to notice that, wait, I can kind of muscle my way through a lot of this. I can land once and the guy gets shaken up a bit. This is the stuff I'm going to start relying on. This is the kind of stuff I'm going to always do in sparring, even though, yeah, I have to learn the technique. But when things get kind of rough in sparring, I'm not having my way, I have my power to get my way through, even though it is a bit sloppy. And then this kind of approach in training and sparring happens for months to years to now decades. Now bring forward a featherweight. They cannot rely on their power to get through things. They cannot rely on being the bigger guy or using their strength and be sloppy. If things go bad for them in sparring, they have to rely on technique to get out of it. So the first day they realize this, they're one of the smallest guys in the whole gym. They have to be more skilled than everybody in order to not get put in bad positions. And this reliance on skilled approach goes on for months to years to decades. And now you got a product of a smaller fighter who is much more skilled than the heavier fighter. So if Colby and Usman were bantamweights, they'd be way more skilled than they are right now, but they wouldn't be as strong or powerful or anything like that. But for the question itself, if we just bring Colby Covington and Usman as they are, as skilled as they are, and just shrunk them down to a bantamweight size, yeah, they probably wouldn't even be top 10. So it's an interesting question, man, but I think a lot of people are prefacing it the wrong way. And then we're going to Crunchy Carrot 06. Hey Weasel, how would you rank all the UFC pay-per-views this year so far? And what are your top 3 or 5 favorite events from the last year? So that is a good question, man. So if you guys want to follow, the first pay-per-view card of the year was UFC 270, headlined by Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. That's the first, and we're going to go all the way to the latest. That was Amanda Nunes versus Julianna Pena 2. Number 1 of the whole year is UFC 275, headlined by Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochazka and Valentina Shevchenko versus Taila Santos. This is the card that also has Zhang Weili knocking out Joanna, Jake Matthews destroying Andre Fiallo, Jack Della Maddalena's dominant first round knockout over Ramazan, Koulibaly's great performance against Sung Woo Choi, Hayasir's performance against Steve Garcia, Silvano Juarez's knockout victory over Liang Na. Crazy card. That's definitely the number 1 of the whole year. The number 2 card of the year, I believe, has to go to UFC 276, Headlined by Israel Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier and Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 3. Even though it had a bad main event, most of the card was insane. Volkanovski's win over Holloway, Pereira's knockout over Strickland, Lawler and Barberina's fight. The Munoz and O'Malley fight was kind of skippable. Jalen Turner submitting Brad Riddell in 45 seconds. Jim Miller retiring down Cerrone and making history. Tavares and Duplessis' insane fight. That was definitely a really good card, but didn't finish off strong. The number 3 is UFC 271, which was headlined by Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. Not that great of a main event, but definitely better than the Cannonier one. The co-main event was Derek Lewis and Tai Tuivasa. That was a brawl. Jared Cannonier's knockout victory over Derek Brunson was insane. Renato Moicano's submission victory over Alexander Hernandez was crazy. Bobby Green's big win against Nasrat Haqparast. Douglas Silva de Andrade had a crazy win. Jeremiah Wells had a good win against Blood Diamond. Rest of the card was whatever. The reason why I don't have it above UFC 276 is for the fact that UFC 276 had many more moments. A lot better fights throughout. The number 4 card of the year goes to UFC 274, headlined by Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje and Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza 2. One of the best main events of the whole year, with the worst co-main event of all time. You had the big knockout of Michael Chandler over Tony Ferguson. Randy Brown had a good win against Chaos Williams. Brandon Royval, insane submission against Schnell. Andre Fiallo had a good knockout win, but the rest of the card was pretty forgettable. And that is why I cannot have it over UFC 271. 271 had many more moments and many better fights. The Rose and Carla fight hurt the card so bad. Any fan of that main event with Oliveira and Gaethje should be blaming the Namajunas and Esparza fight for anybody that's going to be ranking this one lower. The number 5 card of the year, I believe, has to go to the latest UFC 277 card. Julianna Pena versus Amanda Nunes 2. You also had Brendan Moreno versus Kai Kara France 2, which was insane. Sergey Pavlovich putting it on Derek Lewis in a short knockout. Alexandre Pantoja showed up. I believe the highlight of the whole card against Alex Perez. Magomed Ankalaev's win against Anthony Smith was pretty good. Definitely showed to be the better fighter, even though it had a bit of controversy about the injury. Drew Dober's big body shot knockout victory against Rafael Alves. Michael Morales' knockout win against Adam Fugit. Nickalal's big knockout win as well. The rest of the card was actually pretty decent. Nothing too bad about the whole card. Number 6 on the list, I would have to say, is the first pay-per-view card of the whole year, UFC 270. Headlined by Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. That was a very interesting main event, even though not the most exciting. It showed Francis Ngannou's ability to wrestle. It showed his fight IQ in the fight. So the evolution of the champion is always a great thing to see. And then it also proved that Ciryl Gane is by far the best striker of the whole division. And that guy has a very bright future. Davis Figueiredo's win against Brandon Moreno in the trilogy. That was an excellent fight and a bit of controversy. Some people think that Brandon Moreno should have won. Michel Pereira's win against Andre Fiallo was a good one. Saeed Nurmagomedov making short work of Cody Stamann. 47-second submission was crazy. Michael Morales' big knockout win against Trevin Giles. Victor Henry had a good performance against Jaime Barcelos. Jack Della Maddalena showing up, making short work of Pete Rodriguez. Matt Fravola's big knockout win against Valdez. The comeback victory of Vanessa Demopoulos after getting knocked down but then armbarring Silvana Juarez. Very good card, man. You could even argue that's better than some of the other ones that I ranked above. But the number 7 card of the year, I believe, has to go to UFC 272. Headlined by Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal, which was a whatever fight. It was pretty interesting. Wasn't bad. Rafa dos Anjos' dominant performance against Renato Moicano, which was pretty hard to watch if you're a Moicano fan. Bryce Mitchell, I believe, was the star of that night. Big victory against Edson Barboza. Really showed how good he actually is. Monumental win for himself, man. Kevin Holland knocking out Alex Oliveira after losing the majority of the fight. Showed that he always has power to make it change at any moment. Sergey Spivak destroying and dominating Greg Hardy. Jalen Turner's big knockout win against Jamie Malarkey. Marina Rodriguez's big win against Yan Xiaonan, establishing herself as maybe the next fighter in line for a title shot after Zhang Weili gets it. Morales had a good submission win. Umar Nurmagomedov running right through Brian Kelleher. And that was pretty much it. That was a really good card, actually. And then the worst card of the year, but not bad at all. None of the cards this year are bad. Was UFC 273, headlined by Alexander Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie. Dominant performance by Volkanovski. Aljamain Sterling's win against Petr Yan in the rematch was an interesting one. A lot of people did not expect that big upset. Hamzat's big win against Gilbert Burns, showing how good he actually is, and putting on one of the best fights of the whole year. Mackenzie Dern had a pretty good win against Tisha Torres. Ian Gary's fight was, whatever. Anthony Hernandez looked pretty good. Mike Malott had a big knockout win against Mickey Gall. Alexei Olenik's submission win against Venderos, whatever. Not too memorable of a card, to be honest. So I have to say that UFC 273 is the only card that's okay. Rest of the cards of the year were really good. And then with a dangerously dubious Double Davison. Hey Weasel, love your content. Did you hear about the interview Paddy did where he said that he got up to 205 pounds off eating fried foods and candy after UFC London? He gets hilariously out of shape. I feel like he's building his career to be as short as possible. Nutrition this horrendous, and having to be at 155 with so many killers even unranked, makes me feel like his hype train is going to collapse comedically badly. It's horrible for you, man. I don't know why he's getting so fat out of fights. There's going to be a point where he's not going to be able to make 155 again, and he's a young guy. If he can't make 155, it's over for him. Imagine Paddy Pimblett fighting Geoff Neal. Imagine Paddy Pimblett fighting Shavkat Rakhmonov. This is an example of building yourself up for failure. I mean, most people believe that he's not going to be much even at lightweight. So why put himself at such a disadvantage? I have a feeling he's going to be fighting a lot of these lower ranked fighters for a long time, man. There's no way he's going to be Drew Dober doing this, right? And Drew Dober is like right outside the top 15. The guy has star power. The guy is really getting a name out there, but man, that is being super undisciplined. And discipline is one of the most important things for a fighter to be great. But eventually he's going to be putting himself at this handicap. Maybe his cardio starts to diminish as he gets older, that he can't keep eating like that without actually having any drawbacks. And soon enough, he might feel the Roy Jones Jr. effect, getting too big and now cannot compete the same in lower weight classes. With Roy Jones Jr., he was adding weight to go up weight classes, but that hurt him when he tried to go back down. He wasn't able to perform the same way. That could happen to Paddy Pimblett because he's doing it more often than Roy Jones did, and he's not even preparing for fights when he does it. So it's happening a lot more often. And Paddy is doing it unhealthily. Like, he's not being healthy when he's gaining weight. Roy Jones was at least healthy when he was gaining weight, and he felt the drawbacks. Paddy could be hurting his longevity in the sport. And I don't know if he's always done this. I don't know if it's always been a thing about Paddy that he gained weight between fights, or did it just start happening once he started to make money, got these deals and stuff. I don't know if he got too comfortable, and being comfortable made him more willing to be undisciplined. And then we go to Mark Fletcher. Besides watching combat sports and creating content, what else is going on right now for TheWeasle? The last couple weeks have been really busy with landscaping work and roofing work on my house and stuff. You know, I'm getting like a back patio, getting sidewalk, I'm getting some like vegetation going on and stuff. So, man, I had the sickest design for my back patio. I was going to have the electrician come in. I was going to have the lights in there inside of the patio and stuff. I pulled out some trees. I was going to plant some along the patio. I was going to have these rocks that glow at night. It looks so cool. But I will say this, man, do not hire an electrician or any kind of service worker solely because someone in your family knows them. Pick the best. Even if they cost more, pick the best. This guy wasted a week of my time, and now I'm not getting exactly what I planned for. I'm currently building a studio, which is something I'm super excited about. Still training all the time, really getting down my boxing. I'm also constantly writing my novel. For any new viewer, I am someone who constantly writes. I love creating stories. I love like fictional work and stuff like that. I've always been into it ever since I was a little kid. That is something I've been working on for a few years now. But other than that, I just really chill out, hang out with people, play games, watch anime. That's it, really. Superhero movies or series, anime and horror movies are the only things I like to watch. And also Peaky Blinders. I think Peaky Blinders is the best show I've ever seen before. Even though I normally don't watch that kind of stuff for, let's just say, personal reasons or even psychological reasons. But the acting was perfect. The setting was perfect. Love that show, man. It's my favorite ever. Everything else I watch has to be super fictional. The horror movies, the anime, the superhero movies, that's the kind of stuff I'm really into. Nothing related too much to real life. Best horror movie of all time, in my opinion, was The Conjuring, the first one. Best superhero movie of all time, I gotta go with The Dark Knight or Avengers Endgame. And the best anime I've ever watched was, I can't be biased and say Dragon Ball. I can't. The best anime movies are the Berserk movies by far. You have to be able to stomach that kind of gore. If you can, masterpieces. Absolutely insane story, man. Crazy how that guy came up with all that. I don't know what was going through his head. But I think the best anime has to be between Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. I might have to throw an Attack on Titan on that. Attack on Titan is the kind of thing that non-anime viewers can watch. And then go to Jesse Griffin. What do you think about fighters becoming champion and fight to not lose their belt instead of winning? We saw it with Woodley, and now it looks like Adesanya is following the same route. Jon Jones appears to have done the same thing toward the end of his latest run. Not to mention GSP, of course. And don't forget Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo is a big example of that as well. It's certainly understandable, but seems to be a growing trend. Do you think we will see this more in the future, especially when big money is involved, and what kind of impact that will have on the progress of the sport? That's a very good question. I actually called it before it happened with Adesanya. Adesanya is definitely following that same route. I mean, the last 5 fights showed you that. Every single one of his fights is not like when he was coming up. Sometimes it has to do with the competition level. These guys are better, you want to make less mistakes. But then oftentimes, you have opportunities to make it more of an exciting fight and dominate it, but you just don't go that route. You rather go the safer way. Keep your belt, keep the money, constantly do this every single fight, least risk but getting rewards for it. It's happened so many times, man. It happened with Woodley, like you said, happened with GSP, Jon Jones, happened with Jose Aldo, even Amanda Nunes a little bit. You can start to see that she's starting to go the path of least resistance in her fights. And it's smart, but it's not exciting. And here's the thing, in the future, with fighters making more money, it might incentivize them to do this even more. I mean, look what happened to boxing. Every boxer that makes a bunch of money does it, except like Canelo. Like, there's a few guys that don't, but back in like the 70s and 80s, all the champions in boxing were so exciting and entertaining. The more money boxers got, the more like politics went into the negotiations and money aspect of it, the more boring the fighters got. They just didn't want to lose. They didn't want to lose the money. They didn't want to lose the opportunities. So they did what they had to do to win in the most boring way possible. Super defensive stuff and all that. And that seems to be happening with Adesanya right now. So I can definitely see the same thing happening in MMA. I think a big way the UFC tries to go the opposite direction for their fighters is by bringing on the bonuses. But if fighters are making millions of dollars and they're coasting through wins in very boring fashions and stuff, maybe the organization has to up the bonuses. Instead of 50,000, maybe it's like 100,000, maybe it's like 200,000, right? If you get like the best and most exciting win of the night, you get like $200,000. Imagine that. I don't know if that would ever happen, but maybe just for like pay-per-view cards, they can do it because they know they have a big star headlining it. It would incentivize maybe fighters to do that instead. Go for the big win instead of just trying not to lose it all. But there's always going to be blowback if a fighter is doing that. I mean, look at Adesanya's latest pay-per-view numbers. Reportedly much lower than what he generally draws. 400,000 pay-per-view buys, and he had another championship fight to go with it. That is not the numbers that he wants to see. It seems like fans are getting tired of just seeing him coast to get a win. And then your next question, where do you see Diaz going after Hamzat? Obviously, Jake Paul is on the table, but what about after that? Do you think he fully retires, goes back to the UFC Bellator, bare-knuckle boxing, or just keeps trying one-off fights? F's in chat for Diaz and O'Malley. Yeah, definitely F's in chat in comments. I don't think Diaz is ever going to consistently fight after the UFC. I think he'll have one-off fights, and I think Jake Paul might be one of those as well. Whatever interests him, he might just come back and fight, but I don't see it happening too often. And he is older, so there's probably not a lot more fights left for him. Then with a DeLeon. Hey Weasel, first off, wanted to say I'm a huge fan, man. Your fight analysis and breakdowns have helped me understand the sport tremendously. Thank you for all your work so wow. Thank you so much for the kind words. I greatly appreciate it, man. But your question is, do you think if Charles beats Islam, the quitter talk and doubts go away? Or do you think the casuals will continue to find reasons to discredit him or bring up his losses and mishaps at 145? I kind of hate the lack of respect he's getting, especially from Khabib's people, hardcore Khabib fans, and the pandemic casuals. Also, do you think Arman will be added to the 280 card since it's stacked as of now, and against who? Thanks, Weasel. The Oliveira quitter talk should be over now. Nobody should ever bring it up again. If he's not quitting after getting dropped twice by Justin Gaethje, getting dropped by Dustin Poirier, dropped by Michael Chandler and ground and pounded, I don't know when it's gonna ever stop then. I think it's just people that probably don't like Oliveira that say this and are just waiting till the day he gets knocked out. And then they're gonna bring it out. See, this is what I've been talking about the whole time. And it's like, yeah, I mean, eventually he's gonna get knocked out. The way he fights is probably going to happen. But the quitter talk is something that has to be gone already. Until he absolutely quits again, clearly quits, where he just doesn't want to fight anymore. I don't know if that would be due to retirement, he's just done with the sport, or him being afraid in the fight, whatever it is. That's the only time you can ever bring it back. The quitter talk is over. If he beats Islam Makhachev, he deserves respect from all sides. Casual fans, hardcore fans, everybody in the sphere is going to have to respect Oliveira. I mean, how can you not? Islam is such a great fighter. To beat someone like him would be insane. It looks like Islam could dominate the whole weight class. And he is a massive favorite going into the fight. If Oliveira beats that guy, it would have to be incredible. And would Arman be added to the 280 card? I hope so. I think he's calling for it. Arman is a guy, man, that a lot of these guys have to watch out for. And then we go to the public questions, the most liked comments by Liam. How far can Fiziev go in the lightweight rankings? Do you see him earning a title shot in the future? And how do you see these matchups going for him? Fiziev versus Gaethje. I'm going to go with Fiziev. Overall, just a much better technical striker. He has a major speed advantage. He's much more athletic when it comes to the stand-up. He's going to be very hard to take to the ground if Gaethje ever has to do that. And Gaethje will often open himself up or turtle up too much. And he cannot do that against Fiziev. Fiziev versus Chandler. I'm going to go with Fiziev in this one. I think he catches Chandler early. Prime RDA versus Fiziev. Would the outcome change? Outcome doesn't change too much. It would be more competitive. It might be like a split decision or something. But at the end of the day, I think it would be like a 55-45 for Fiziev. Thank you for all that you do. I love the content. Thank you so much for the question, man. I think with the Victor Alvarado. Number 1, can you rank the champions based on the level of excitement in their fights? And number 2, can you break down the tiers of an MMA fan? Thanks, TheWeasle. Love your content. Okay, so the most exciting champion to the least exciting. Most exciting, number 1, Yuri Prohaska. Number 2, Charles Oliveira. Number 3, Francis Ngannou. Number 4, Davison Figueiredo. Or you can even exchange Davison and Ngannou. Number 5, Kamaru Usman. Number 6, Alexander Volkanovski. Number 7, Amanda Nunes. Number 8, Aljamain Sterling. Number 9, Valentina Shevchenko. Number 10, Israel Adesanya. And number 11, Carla Esparza. And then the tiers of MMA fan. Okay, so you got we're going to start from the most casual to the most hardcore. The super casual fans, or like the casual of all casuals, are, people who only watch Conor McGregor. Sometimes that Khabib guy, this guy they call Stylebender seems fun. Jon Jones is a beast. That's the lowest of the tier list. They're guys that can't be bothered about the sport. They don't really care too much. They think Conor's really funny. They watch him knock people out, and they think like him or Khabib are the greatest fighters of all time. They don't know when the prelims start. They don't even know when the main card starts. They kind of just start watching in the middle of the main card, sometimes the middle of the prelims. They just don't know the times. They think wrestling is really boring. As soon as the fight gets taken to the ground, they scream, why doesn't the ref just stand it up? And they always ask, wait, you're allowed to elbow somebody? Wait, you're allowed to kick someone in the leg? These are also your fans that would say that MMA is different than real life. Man, if I was in there, I'd be lighting this guy up. It's different on the streets, man. If I were to black out, none of that jiu-jitsu will help them. Oh, and you'll never hear the end of it if a fighter gets into the north-south position. Nothing against any of the fans. This is just from my experience with all of them. Then we got regular casual fans. Regular casual fans, they know some of the other champions, like they heard of Charles Oliveira. They heard that he's a quitter, though. They know that Conor's not the best fighter, but they still watch him more than anybody else, even though he hasn't fought in like 5 years. They'll watch Conor McGregor training videos. They'll watch like Khabib interviews. They know the techniques that are allowed in the sport, but they also ask, why can't you just headbutt him? Why can't you just kick them when they're on the ground? And for most of the fights, other than the main event, they're going to be on their phone. Then we go to semi-hardcore fans. This is like you're entering the hardcore space. You know every single champion by name. You haven't watched all of their fights. You only watch like a couple of their most recent, and very vaguely, like they don't remember everything that happened in those fights. This is why they believe that Max Holloway defeated Volkanovski in the second one. They understand a lot of the sport. They understand the rules, except they don't know how scoring goes. So this is where you start to get to people that are trying to understand how scoring works, but they don't actually care to read it. And that is why they're calling every single fight a robbery. Casual fans don't even know what a robbery scorecard is. Whoever wins, they kind of just accept it. The semi-hardcore fans are the ones that get most upset with split decisions. They always think it's a robbery. And at this point, they don't think that Adesanya is that boring. Casual fans think he's very boring. Hardcore fans think he's really boring. It's like the semi-hardcore fans don't think he's that boring. They're like, oh, he's really good, and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, he's not that entertaining. And then we go to the hardcore fans. These are like the solid hardcore fans that have been watching for years. They know not only the champions, they know most of the contenders, if not the whole top 15. They've watched the majority of all the champions' runs. They may not have watched them, but they know the legacy of GSP, Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo, etc. That most fans can ask for their opinions in the sport, and they're going to be mostly correct when it comes to casuals questions. These are the fans that really want to get down the technical aspect of the game. They want to know why fighters are able to do certain things, how this worked and stuff like that. These are the kind of fans that are probably going to watch the majority of like breakdown videos. They really want to understand the nuances of the sport. And eventually, the deeper they go into the hardcore space, the more they're going to understand. But then it gets into where they start to overanalyze. I'm going to talk about it a little later. But I would have to say that the regular hardcore fans are the fans that just love to just watch the fights. They're not the most combative. They're not the most argumentative. Probably the easiest to deal with and actually watch fights together with. They'll call things a robbery and stuff, but they're not going to be so crazy about it. They're going to be like, yeah, I kind of see it the other way as well. That is your hardcore fan in MMA. And then you go to your super hardcore fan. These are your fans that know a lot about the sport. They've read every single book. They've read like boxing books back in the 1950s. They've been watching MMA since Hoyce Gracie came out the womb. These are your fans that have been around for a pretty long time, and they actually don't watch that many fights anymore because they know it all already. They know every single fighter. They know what every single fighter does, and because of that, 90% of the fighters that even at the top organizations are either too bad to watch or too boring to even care about. And this is where their all-knowingness needs to be presented to show that guys like Dan Hardy don't really know what they're talking about. They are peons when it comes to analysis, and they will really show you what's actually happening in fights in the most technical level. But 99% of the time, fights are completely overanalyzed and they're making it a lot more complicated than it actually is by throwing around a lot of overcomplicated jargon that could have easily just been said in a much more simpler way. And every single motion and movement has a cognitive thought behind it, which is most of the time not true. Most of the things that go on in fights are not thought of. Most of it's just instinct, muscle memory, reaction. There's a lot of punches that land that don't really have much of a meaning other than throwing it to land. Nothing that technical about a lot of stuff that you actually see. These are also your fans that have trained with the Gracies. They swear they're part of the lineage. And what they did more in their spare time was analyze the fights and read books. That is your tier list of an MMA fan. They all have good and bad things about them. I don't think it's an insult to be a super hardcore fan or a super casual fan. I don't think there's anything wrong with either of them. Every fan should be welcomed. I mean, the casual fans eventually become the hardcore fans. That's just what happens. You don't just start as a hardcore fan. Everyone started off not really knowing much. Everybody started off watching just mainly Chuck Liddell or mainly Anderson Silva or mainly Conor McGregor. For me, it was Anderson Silva that got me interested in the sport. For a lot of people today, it was Conor McGregor, and there's no shame in that at all. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been watching since Conor came that know more than the people that have been watching since Chuck Liddell was a thing. And then we go to Imran. The odds seem to overwhelmingly be against Duke Bronx with how effective the Dagestani method has proven to be in neutralizing threats. What are the champ's key to victory at UFC 280, or will it be a complete shutout in Makhachev's favor? Thanks for the great insights and content. Always a pleasure to listen. We should not be surprised if Islam absolutely dominates the whole fight. He takes Oliveira to the ground, tries to drown him, and just shuts down any kind of threat that Oliveira can throw up. And I was also talking to my cousin about this. I would not be surprised if Islam even drops Oliveira with a strike. If he explodes out there with a left overhand and just drops him. I would not be surprised at all. I mean, he's done it to other fighters in the past. He has some knockout power. It's not crazy. Oliveira definitely hits much harder and just much cleaner technique and whole overall striking department. But Oliveira's easily hit. If Makhachev lunges in with left hands, I would not be surprised if he drops Oliveira, and that'd be a very bad situation for Oliveira in this one because usually he doesn't have to worry about the fighter chasing him to the ground. Whenever they do, they get tied up and almost caught in submissions. A lot of people talk about, Dustin should have went to the ground when he dropped Oliveira, when people forget that he actually did. Dustin chased Oliveira to the ground and barely got anything out of it. He almost got tied up on the ground. With someone like Makhachev, who has the expertise in the grappling like he does, it's a whole different kind of threat. Oliveira has to actually respect his opponent's grappling. And that also goes into the factor that he probably doesn't want to throw too many kicks. This is the first fight where he probably doesn't want to spam kicks out there. With everybody else, he doesn't even care. They're not going to catch it and take him to the ground. If they try to catch it like, for example, Kevin Lee did, he's going to choke him out, man. With Islam, it's a different kind of story. I don't agree with the odds that Islam is going to dominate because I don't think that's the most likely scenario. It can happen, but the odds should resemble the most likely way the fight is going to go down. That is probably going to be a bit more competitive, especially early on. Oliveira's going to land some strikes on the feet. He's going to threaten with submissions. Makhachev might take him to the ground a couple times. He might land some strikes of his own. It might be a little bit slower early on. I think the faster that Oliveira pressures, or the faster the pace he puts on, the faster we're going to see if the fight is going to be a dominant performance from Makhachev, or it's going to be competitive, back and forth, or it's going to be Oliveira just washing him fast. So I think the odds should be more like Islam being a favorite minus 170, not minus like 300. That's crazy. But the probability of a shutout in Makhachev's favor might be like a 30% chance, which is actually pretty high. And then we go to Michael J. Hey Weasel, do you think Adesanya will change his counterpunching style for Pereira, such as going forward and towards the power, similar to how Fury fought Wilder? Also, do you think he will employ some grappling into his game plan as well? Love the videos, by the way, keep it up. That's an interesting question. Now, I don't think Adesanya is going to march forward into the power puncher for the fact that it's different than the Fury and the Wilder fight. Wilder's not as good on the back foot. They say a lot of times you want to pressure the power puncher, not when the power puncher can counter at an elite level. So Adesanya does not want to march him down. He doesn't want to go forward too much. The best thing he wants to do is keep it in the center, which Pereira will do as well. Pereira doesn't mind keeping the fight neutral. But to march a guy like that down who has insane countering ability with one-punch knockout power, it's different. Wilder is not as technical as Pereira anywhere, especially when it comes to the counterpunching. But Adesanya cannot stay counter-striking for too long. He needs to do everything. He needs to bring every aspect of his striking style to fruition here. Forward aggression, counter-striking, feeling things out, a lot of feints. This is going to be a technical chess match with the threat of either guy getting shut out with one shot. Will Adesanya try to grapple? I don't think so. He can try. It wouldn't surprise me if he shoots a takedown or two, but what I see is he shoots a takedown, it gets stuffed. He's not that high level of a wrestler yet to be able to shoot confidently even against someone like Pereira. Better grapplers have shot takedowns on Pereira and he stuffed all of them. It would be so outside of Adesanya's element, and I think if Pereira shuts down the takedown, it's going to grow his confidence and Adesanya's confidence will probably lower. Not for the fact that he has no other choice in the fight, but for the fact that he tried something and it failed on him. Anything that fails for a fighter is going to play with something in their head, whether it be so minuscule or major. And any failed takedown attempt is going to open Adesanya up for counterpunches from Pereira. So it gives too many openings. So I think this fight has to be a striking match. And it might be one of the most technical striking matches we've ever seen in MMA. And then we go to Princess Lioness. Hey Weasel, if you could re-rank the lightweight division from best to 15th, including unranked guys, how would you do it? Thank you so much. I love your content. Man, this is going to be a controversial take. I can already see it. Okay, this is just my opinion. I could be wrong on this. Hard to predict the future of how these guys are going to perform against each other, but this is how I see it. Islam Makhachev is number 1. Charles Oliveira is number 2. Dustin Poirier is number 3. Rafael Fiziev is number 4. Mateusz Gamrot's number 5. Armin Saryukin is number 6. Damir Ismagulov is number 7. Guram Kutaladze is number 8. Justin Gaethje is number 9. Jalen Turner is number 10. Michael Chandler is number 11. Beneil Dariush is number 12. Rafael dos Anjos is number 13. Conor McGregor is number 14. Atman Azaitar is number 15. That's how I see it currently. And then we go to Josh Wiggin. Hey Weasel, can you rank these lightweight prospects in order of potential? Okay, so this is a little bit different than how good they are right now. So we have Armin, Fiziev, Gamrot, Guram, Damir, Yoel Alvarez, and Islam. I think number 1 is Armin. I think he has the highest potential. Number 2 is Fiziev. Number 3 is Islam. Number 4 is Damir. Number 5 is Gamrot. Number 6 is Guram. And then number 7 is Yoel Alvarez. I think Alvarez is cut off pretty big there. Everybody else has a lot of potential. I don't see Alvarez having that much potential at lightweight too long. I don't think he's going to be able to make the weight class too long. And I think it's definitely going to hurt his potential. And that is ultimately the end of the podcast, guys. Amazing questions. Really fun podcast, guys. And I'll see you in the next video.